Did you guys know that you can make your own buttons? Literally in whatever size, shape, and colorway you want. Same goes for DIY phone grips and even hair clips. I made all of these using printable shrink plastic sheets, and I'm going to show you how in this tutorial. This is the general process. We'll first download or create our designs, make a layout to print, cut out the shapes, bake, and once it's exposed to the heat, it'll shrink down, harden, and thicken up in size. We'll then seal it up with some resin, and you can apply the same process and make things like keychains, earrings, necklace charms. It's super fun and pretty easy to do, so let's get started. I have a supplies list linked if any of you guys want to reference it. So first we need shrink plastic sheets. For this tutorial, I'm going to be using the printable frosted one. It has this semi-transparent look to it. I like it because you can see the design from both sides. It's also available in white if you don't want it transparent. Just make sure you're getting the one that specifies that it's printable. You can also draw your designs by hand if you prefer. You can use regular shrink plastic. It's actually a bit cheaper than the printable version. The sheets look the same. You can choose from frosted, clear, or white. The main difference between these will obviously be the end look, but also the type of medium you have to use. So like with the clear, you can only use permanent or alcohol-based markers or acrylic paints. Whereas for the frosted and the white, you can also use color pencils. I won't be using these in this tutorial, but I wanted to just show you guys. You'll also need an ink printer. It doesn't have to be a fancy one. Just keep in mind that it's not compatible with laser printers. If you're using the semi-transparent plastic like I am, then we'll also need some regular paper as well. Not to run it through the printer, but we'll just be using it as a backing to help us see the prints better while we're cutting. We'll be using an oven, so we need a baking tray, some parchment paper, oven mitts, and you're going to want something with a flat surface to help flatten out the buttons since they curl up a bit after baking. I'm just using a wooden cutting board. Some UV resin, and not pictured, but you'll also need a brush or a small spatula to apply it with. A curing lamp, you can also cure it in the sun if you don't have one. Something sharp like an awl or toothpick. Some gloves, and a non-stick surface to work on like parchment paper or plastic protector sheets would work. We'll need some scissors, and if you're making buttons, we'll also need a circle hole punch. You don't need all of these, I just wanted to show you guys some of the different ones I have. I'll mostly be using a 1-inch hole punch in this tutorial, but here's a 3/4 inch one and a 1.5 inch one. They come in all sizes, and the one you want to get for yourself is going to depend on the amount of shrinkage your plastic has, as well as the size of buttons you're wanting. So this is going to vary. Different brands might have more shrinkage than others. I'd recommend testing your plastic first to figure out the shrinkage and then deciding which size hole punch to get. I'll talk more about this later and how to calculate it for yourself. Next, we'll need a small hole punch for the inner holes. This also comes in different sizes, and again, you don't need all of these. It is just going to depend on your shrinkage and the size of buttons you're wanting. You'd want to make sure that the inner holes are a good size ratio compared to the overall button. This is a classic hole punch. It creates a 1/4 inch hole about 6.3 millimeters. These are eyelet pliers. It creates a 3.5 millimeter hole, and these are the ones I'll be using in this tutorial. I also have this revolving hole punch. It's cool because it has multiple sizes ranging from 2 millimeters to 4.5 millimeters. Also, I'm not sure if it's just mine, but for this one, you do have to be kind of strong. It does take some extra effort to puncture through the plastic. If you're making phone grips or hair clips, you'll also need some glue. Make sure it's the clear one. A phone grip base, you can get MagSafe or the stick-on ones, and some hair clips or bobby pins. Now, let's talk about shrinkage. Here's an exact before and after, and you can see how much they shrank, thickened up in size, and they also became a bit darker. Most shrink plastic will advertise it as shrinking down to 20% of the original size, but for me, I've used a few different brands and mine always shrink down to about 40% of the original. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, it just means we need to do some calculations beforehand so we don't end up with something that's too big or too small. What I would recommend is to first do a test sheet with a couple different sizes, test out different opacities. These were all set at 88%. Try different colors and just see what works for you. I'll talk more about the design and layout process later, but for now I wanted to share my shrinkage measurements just as a reference and how to calculate your own. This is a handy measuring tool. We have millimeters on the bottom and linea on the top, which is the traditional unit of measure for buttons and is often abbreviated as L. So when you buy buttons, you'll often see the sizing being referred to as a number, like 12L, 14L, 16L, and so on, and that's what it stands for. So here we have the 3/4 inch cutout. It shrank down to about 0.3 inch, which is 8 millimeters, which is equivalent to 13L. Next, we have the 1 inch cutout. It shrank down to about 0.4 inch, which is 11.1 millimeters, which is equivalent to 18L. And lastly, we have the 1.5 inch cutout. It shrank down to about 0.6 inch, which is 16.2 millimeters, which is equivalent to 26L. Okay guys, time for some simple math. If we know the print size is 1 inch, and the final size is 0.4375 inch, we can follow this formula to figure out the percentage amount remaining. So we'll take 0.4375 inch as the final size, divided by 1 inch, the original print size, multiply by 100, and that equals 43.75% remaining of the original. You can use the same formula for millimeters. It's interchangeable as long as you're using the same unit of measure throughout. Now that we know the plastic shrinks down to 43.75% of the original size, think about what you want your final size to be for whatever you're making. For example, let's say I want a giant button to be 2.25 inch, which is actually the size of the phone grip I made. We can follow this formula to figure out what the print size needs to be. So 2.25 inch as the desired final size, divided by the percent remaining as a decimal. So to get the percent as a decimal, we divide 43.75 by 100. That equals 0.4375. So the equation is 2.25 divided by 0.4375. And that equals a 5.14 print size. And again, you can use the same formula for millimeters. It's interchangeable. Of course, it might not always be exact down to the decimal, but at least now we have a good idea of what to expect, and we're not wasting any time guessing and hoping our prints turn out the right size. And so now that the math is out of the way, let's talk about the designs. There's a bunch of inspo you can look at on Pinterest. I like searching for prints like plaid, gingham, stripes, polka dots. Think of circular shapes. I like the idea of ceramic plates. Since it has that inner rim similar to buttons, it can be more abstract. Think textures, fabrics, literally anything. There are some free stock images you can download on websites like Canva, FreePic. Adobe Stock is subscription-based, but they do offer a free trial. You can even use your own photos, scan in your own artwork, so there's lots of options. It's also really easy to create your own prints so that they're in the colorways you want. It's really simple to do, and I'll show you how to do it in both Adobe Illustrator and in Canva. Let's start with Adobe Illustrator. We want to first create our artboards. My shrink paper isn't exactly US letter size. It measures at 8.2 by 11.6 inch. So make sure yours is set at the correct size. I also already have open a separate artboard for my workspace. I have some downloaded prints that I already dropped in, as well as some that I created. It's pretty easy to design your own print because it doesn't have to be a perfect repeat, since we'll eventually be cutting them into circles anyway. First, I like using the rectangle tool to create some color swatches to easily reference back to. I'm using a Mac, so Command C to copy, Command V to paste, and just change them to the colors you want. We'll next create the background for the print. So I'm doing a 2 by 2 inch square, though yours might be different depending on what you're making. To make the stripes, I'm still using the rectangle tool and I'm just dragging it to the length and width I want. Copy and paste a few and space them out however you want. You can select all and then click horizontal distribute so it's evenly spaced. I also like to group them, Command G, so I can easily change the colors with the eyedropper tool. And that's literally it. It's super easy. For the gingham, I'm going to make a copy of the stripe print we just made. Make sure the stripes are grouped, copy, paste, rotate, and you can just mess around with the opacity and now you have a gingham. And let me just make another copy so I have a stripe. So I'm just using the eyedropper tool and my color swatches to change up the colors. For the polka dots, use the ellipse tool and again just copy and paste, distribute them however you want, group, and then use the eyedropper tool to change up the colors. Next, we'll be using the clipping mask to crop these into circles. So first we want to make sure that each design is grouped. If it's a print that you downloaded, you can skip this. Use the ellipse tool to create the size you want. I'm doing 1-inch circles. And then just drag the circle over your pattern and position it however you want. Select both the circle and the print, right-click, make clipping mask. And we want to make sure the circle is on top of the pattern. For example, if it's behind the pattern, it's not going to work, or maybe you'll get an error message. We'll do this for all of them. However, at this point, test your shrinkage if you need to. Don't crop all of them just yet. Stick with me for a second while I finish this, then I'll go over how to set up a test page. If you're wanting to readjust the placement of the print after cropping it, all you have to do is double click and then drag the print to however you want. This print here I downloaded from Adobe Stock. I like how there's different patterns patched together, so I can actually get a variety of buttons just from this one print if I set them at different placements. Since I want to make some variations, I'm going to make some copies, then position my circles, change up the sizing, then finally select both the pattern and the circle, right-click, make clipping mask, and now I have this cute theme going on. I'm going to go ahead and select all of my circles and paste it into the artboard I created earlier. If you need to set up a test page, click on the ellipse tool and input the different sizes you want to test. So maybe 1.5 inch, 1.25 inch, 1 1/8, 1 inch, and 3/4. You definitely don't have to do all of these. You only need one to calculate the shrinkage. I just think it's nice to also test different colors and opacities. Line them up along the top row. And since I already made these clipping masks, I'm going to release them. So right-click, release clipping mask to get the full prints back. Rearrange them to the new sizes, right-click, make clipping mask, and then I can go ahead and delete my old circles. Arrange it however you want, just don't line them up right along the edge. Leave some space so your printer doesn't cut it off. Select each circle and adjust the opacity. I like having mine set at around 85 to 90%. Save this first page as a PDF, then open it in Adobe Acrobat and print it from there. If you don't have a circle hole punch yet, just cut it out with scissors. Once you've calculated your shrinkage and decided on your print size, you can then go ahead and use the clipping mask for the rest of your layout. Okay, so now back to the layout. You want to line up the first row, select all, then horizontal distribute center, and then vertical align top so that they're all nice and even. I'm going to do this for each row. You can line up the side edges first. So select all on the left side, horizontal align left, and then the same for the right, horizontal align right. Then go in with the horizontal distribute center and vertical align top for each row. If you want to make multiples of the same one, just copy and paste, and I'm using an 88% opacity here. If you have a specific shape you want to make, like this fish for hair clips or maybe a butterfly button, you can use the pen tool and draw out whatever shape you want, and then draw in any details. This is all done with the pen tool. I won't get too much into it, but what we want to do is create a clipping mask of the fish outline. So make a copy of your print, release the clipping mask and delete the old circle. I'm adjusting the print to make sure the fish fits. Then select the fish outline, copy and paste, drag it over and arrange it to the print. Make sure the outline is showing from the top. So right now it's behind the print. So I'm gonna right click the print, arrange, then send to back. Now we can select both the outline and the print, right click, make clipping mask, and there we go. Now we can line it up with the other details we drew. Same thing here, I'm just adjusting my print so that it fits. I updated the colors of the fish details I drew, making some more colorways, and then copying and pasting those details, and then changing up the colors. So it's really easy to do if you wanted to make multiple variations of something. For the phone grips, I have these images I downloaded from Adobe stock. I just dropped them in and dragged them to the size I wanted. If you remember earlier from our calculations, the giant buttons are 5.14 inch. I made the flowers slightly bigger and updated the opacity to 88%. I also arranged more buttons where I could fit just to use up some of the empty space. And that's basically it. Then file and save as a PDF. Now for Canva, it's fairly similar. I'm going to first create my page with the shrink paper measurements. Mine isn't exactly US letter. It measures at 8.2 by 11.6 inch, so make sure yours is set at the correct size. You can go to Elements and search for any prints you like and just drop them in. If you have some already downloaded, go to Uploads and upload the files. I already have these added. And now if you want to create your own designs, it's pretty simple to do because it doesn't have to be a perfect repeat since we'll eventually be cutting them into circles anyway. Go to Tools, Shapes, and click on the square. Create the background and just drag it to the size you want. I'm doing 2 by 2 inches. Make a few copies. I'm using a Mac, so Command C and paste Command V. Change up the colors to however you want. To create the stripe, go back to the square tool, drag it to the length and width you're wanting, copy and paste a few, and to line them all up, select all, right-click, align elements, and select top. Set up the stripe placement, and if you want it evenly distributed, select all, right-click, click space evenly, and then select horizontal. I'm changing it to a darker shade of pink. And lastly, I'm just going to right click and group them all together so I can easily change the colors later if I want. And that's it, now you have stripes. Now for the gingham, copy and paste the stripes we just made, change up the color, then copy and paste. Then I'm just going to rotate the stripe and you can change up the size if you want, then realign it, change up the transparency, and now you have a gingham. For polka dots, go back to the tools, shapes, choose a circle, and drag it to the size you want. Copy and paste a few and distribute the layout however you want. You can use the align elements and space evenly tools to easily do this. Once you're satisfied, select all, right click and group, change up the colors, and then align it back to the background. Next, I want to make some different color variations, so select the 3 prints, copy and paste, click on the designs and move them off to the side for now. And remember, they should be grouped so it's easy to select. Change up the background colors as well as the stripes and the dots, and that's it. Once you're done, select the entire print, right click and go to Download Selection. Save it as a PNG and do this for all of them. Go to Uploads and upload the prints we just made. I'm dropping them in directly from my download history. Now I'm going to go ahead and crop these into circles. However, if you need to test your shrinkage, don't crop all of them just yet. Stick with me for a second while I finish this, then I'll go over how to set up a test page. Go to Elements, Frame, click on this circle one, drag it to the size you want. I'm doing 1 inch. Copy and paste a few. Select your first row, right click, space evenly, and then select horizontal. I'm going to get rid of one because it's a bit crowded. Space evenly again, and then align elements to the top. Next, we're going to go to Uploads. Click on the print you want, and then just drag it into your circle. If you want to resize and change the position of the print, just double click and you can arrange it however you want. If you want multiples of the same print, just copy and paste. You can also change the print by just dropping in a new one. The prints that we chose earlier directly from Canva, we can just drag and drop in. And again, double click and resize if you want, so super easy. Now, if you need to do a test page, go to Elements, Frames, click on the circle, and then size them to however you want. So here I'll do 1.5 inch, 1.3, 1.2, 1 inch, and a 0.8. You definitely don't have to do all of these. You really only need one to calculate the shrinkage. I just think it's nice to also test different colors and opacities. And we'll do the same thing, just drop and drag in whichever print. Create a new page and copy and paste your test circles. Line them up right along the top, just don't get too close to the edge. Leave some space so your printer doesn't cut it off. Then remember to adjust and change up the transparency. I like to have mine set at around 85 to 90%, but see what works for you. Now save this test page as a PDF. Open it in Adobe Acrobat and print from there. If you don't have a circle hole punch yet, just cut it out with scissors. And once you've calculated your shrinkage and decided on your print size, you can then go ahead and create the rest of your layout. So now I'm going to create a new page, copy and paste my circles, and then finish up with my layout. This is the print I downloaded from Adobe Stock. It has this patchwork design and multiple prints within. So I can actually get a few different designs just from this one print if I change up the placement. So I'll make a few copies and then line them up at different spots. So double click each circle and then resizing and rearranging the print for each one. And then just making copies until I fill up my page. You can also create some fun shapes like this. So go to Uploads and drop in a print. Go to Clipping Mask. If you don't have Clipping Mask, go to the apps icon, search for it there, and then just add it to your workspace. So make sure you have your print selected and then click Start Masking. They have these fun shapes you can choose from. Arrange it how you want and then click Add to Design and then resize it if you need to. If you have a specific shape you want to make, like this fish for hair clips, I'm not super familiar with Canva, so if anyone can share a better way of doing this, do let us know in the comments, but this is how I was able to do it. So I'm going to drop in my print again, go to Clipping Mask, and instead of choosing from their shapes, click on Image and then choose File. So I drew this fish outline in Illustrator and exported it as a PNG. You can also draw one in Canva using the line tool and saving it as a PNG. The only thing is that you have to make sure it has a transparent background. So if you have the regular version of Canva and you don't have that option, do it on your phone or through another app. You can also search something like fish silhouette and download something similar. And again, just make sure it has a transparent background. Click on it and then size it however you want and then add to design. Okay, so now that we have our fish, we can go to tools, lines, and then draw out any details you want, change up the colors, and arrange it directly on top. And remember to adjust the transparency. For the phone grips, go to Uploads, upload the files and drop in your images. I downloaded these ones from Adobe Stock. I'm creating a new page and just dropping them in. Drag and size them however you want, depending on your shrinkage. For the buttons, I want to single out the ones I'm using. So instead of cropping it with the crop tool, it leaves this white background that blocks the other one. So instead, I'm going to go to Clipping Mask, choose the circle shape, and then arrange it around the button. So now we don't have to worry about that white background. Size it how you want, and remember to adjust the transparency, and that's basically it. To save, go to Share, Download. File type is PDF print, and then open up the PDF in Adobe Acrobat, and then print it from there. To print, make sure it's set at actual size or 100% scale and auto orientation. We want to print on the non-glossy side, so load it in correctly depending on your printer. We don't need to add regular paper or anything as a backing, it runs through on its own. I did find it easier to load in each page one at a time. My printer did occasionally have some trouble detecting it, but I just gently pushed it in a bit until it latched on. After it prints, give it some time to dry. It's going to look a little bit faint and opaque, but remember it's going to darken up a bit while it's baking, so don't worry. Now for the cutting. Since I'm using semi-transparent sheets, you can see that it's pretty faint, kind of hard to see. So I'm adding some regular printer paper along the back just to help while cutting. If you're using the white shrink plastic, you'll be fine without. So I'm just lining up the circle hole punch, holding it from the back side facing up just so I can see it better. And the plastic is going to pop right out. Some might go flying, so keep that in mind. And after each row, use some scissors to cut off the excess so the hole punch can reach the next row. My printer cut off a bit along the top for this one, but it actually fits my 3/4 inch hole punch, so I'm just going to use that here. Cutting out the butterflies and the fish with some scissors. And now for the inner holes. I have my eyelet pliers, something pointy to have on hand just in case I need to clear any holes that didn't get fully punctured. And optional color pencil if you want to make any markings as a guide, or you can just eyeball it. You can do 4 holes, 2 holes, just go all around and pierce each one. If you ever start feeling like it's getting really difficult to squeeze your pliers or it's not fully puncturing through, you probably just need to clear out the tiny little holes that are building up. So I like to just squeeze the pliers really hard to help push them through, and then use something sharp to help pick them out. See how easy it just glides through now? This part is not sped up. For the foam grips, I'm just using scissors to cut out. These were the extra circles I had while showing you guys the supplies, and I'm just going to color them in so they don't go to waste, and here's how they turned out. Now we're ready to bake. So I lined my baking sheet with some parchment paper and laying each button glossy side down. My oven is set at 329 degrees Fahrenheit and recommended baking time is 1 to 2 minutes. Though that might be different for you, so follow the instructions yours came with. If you take a look in the oven, you'll see the buttons shrinking down, curling up along the edges, and then flattening out a bit. I ended up baking mine for the full 2 minutes, and right away I put the wooden cutting board directly on top, adding some pressure to help flatten it out and letting it cool down a bit before I take it off, and careful not to burn yourself. See how large they go in and how tiny they come out. And here's how they're looking. The shrinkage is perfect. The green fish did turn out a bit darker than I wanted. Here were the ones I colored in myself, as well as the tortoise print. You can tell for the darker colors, it isn't fully transparent. See how it's a bit white on the backside? But that's okay, I'm still really happy with them. And now for the UV resin. We're almost done, just some finishing touches. So remember, there's a glossy side and a matte side. Since we printed on the matte side, we need to seal in the ink. Remember to work on some parchment paper or plastic protector sheets so it doesn't stick, but it's pretty simple for the phone grips and the hair clips. I'm just smearing on a layer, making sure to get all the sides and gliding over any air bubbles. I'm curing for about 2 minutes, and you can do another layer of resin too if you want it to be a bit thicker. For the buttons, use an awl or a toothpick to hold it in place. The most important thing is we want to make sure we're not blocking any of the holes with resin. So what I like doing is dabbing my brush around the edge first to remove some of the excess, then doing a slight coating in the center. Don't be too heavy-handed here or else you'll spend a lot of time trying to clear out the holes. Getting some more resin and just dabbing around the edges so it has a really good coating. Don't brush it back and forth too much or else it might smear the ink. And you'll easily be able to tell if any of the holes are clogged, so just poke a toothpick through and it should clear it up. I'm curing for 2 minutes, and this part does take some trial and error, but once you get the hang of it, it is pretty easy. And next, if you're making phone grips, you just need to glue them down to the base. For the hair clips, I'm using the plastic protector sheet I was using earlier for the resin and clipping them on so there's a barrier in between so the glue doesn't get all over the bottom clip, and just gluing them on. I left them alone for a few hours to dry, and I'm putting the buttons to use right away. I used the boat neck button down sewing pattern available on my Etsy, Sewing with Jen, and that's it for the tutorial. I hope this was helpful. If you end up making anything, please tag me. I'd love to see your creations.